Welcome back. You're now watching the lifestyle segment on The Weekend Show. When I first got into university, and this may tell my age a little bit, in 2002, the first week after resumption, we were hit by a 6-month strike. And so for 6 months, we had to go back home and wait till government had done their negotiations, and this was, I think, at the end of 2002. And so we resumed in January 2003. Now, what that meant was that they had to rush a whole semester and then make sure we didn't have breaks in between to be able to catch up with the calendar year. Now, this was my experience, but I do recall in the 90s, we already had ASSU strikes. I'm guessing in the 80s and the 70s, this has been a recurring factor. Having unions to protect the rights of employees and staff of organizations is extremely important so that you have a voice. However, when they have demands and claims and you bring them to the table for negotiations, it's extremely important that agreements are followed through on. The problem is every administration which comes in, the first conversations which we have is around strikes by the Academic Staff Union of Nigerian universities. For the lecturers, I actually do understand, and I said this in the introduction, when you have professors earning less than ₦1 million, in most cases about 500,000 naira, and they don't even get paid as frequently or as often, and then you have the political class who are living their best lives, and you even have people who these lecturers have taught over the years, how do we expect them to give the best which they have? Over the last 5 to 6 years, the Jackpot syndrome, we've seen a lot of Nigerian talents leave Nigeria. How does this help us? Is this going to lead to a talent and knowledge drain? We will be talking about ASSU strikes and the way forward. And joining me, I have an experienced public affairs analyst, Mr. Benjamin Bem Gong. Good morning and welcome to The Weekend Show, sir.
Very good morning to our viewers.
He is a retired Director of Information and Public Relations, Federal Ministry of Information. He holds a master's degree in international law and diplomacy. He has a BSc in international relations and civil service career spanning 35 years across 17 MDAs, including the Ministry of Aviation, Federal Ministry of Information, Communications, and many more. It's a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you very much.
You've been in the system for years, and so you've seen people come and go in the same way. This conversation which we've had, I'm not even assuming you've seen it happen time and time and time again. Is there going to be an end in sight with ASSU strikes in this country?
I don't think so. By my projection, we're nowhere near an end to this quagmire. I say there's no end in sight because you have a situation where we're doing the same thing today, tomorrow, next. And if I should borrow from my good friend Malam Nasir Rufai, he said, if you're doing the same thing every day, you don't expect a different result. I don't see an end to the current ASSU strike because we've got it wrong from the beginning. And we're going on that trajectory. We're not likely to have a solution.
So to the outsider, once they hear ASSU strike, what we hear is lecturers are not being paid enough. However, the lecturers have also spoken about their benefits, their welfare, their pensions, and all the like. Do you feel that this is just a money issue?
Not really. First, ASSU members, the lecturers, the professors, are operating within the framework of the Nigerian economy. So when you say they are not paid much, also ask yourself, how much are other public servants, civil servants in the system being paid? It's not just about ASSU. Other people are also not being paid much. But let me say this, each time, because I have been in the system for quite a while, spending 7 years of my career in the Ministry of Education. Each time committees are set up to look at the framework, the emolument framework, they come back citing Cameroon, they are paying this XYZ amount of money, citing South Africa, citing some of these countries have 2 or 3, 4 universities. Nigeria has over 60 public, but federal universities. If you're saying public, things that are far more than that, including the states. They are far more than that. So when you say you are not being paid much, I really don't understand exactly what that means, because this might not be a very popular view, but we need to look at it. We're not being paid much. How much are others being paid? That's relative to yours, it's a small pay. And when they take some international comparison, you find that they'll be citing countries they will never. The analysis does not cite countries where our own pay is higher. I have it on authority that in Eastern Europe, even at the current exchange rate, the payment of ASSU members and Nigerian university lecturers is higher than what is obtainable in most parts of Eastern Europe, Romania, the Balkan states. Ukraine, and all this.
So this is where I disagree, sir, and I'll let you finish, because I also am a lecturer and I lecture out of Nigeria.
Yeah.
Academia doesn't pay so much, but in those places they've got grants, they've got funds which support the academic research of the professors, of the lecturers. The universities also have other forms of partnerships where they get extra revenue. And so even if the basic salaries is not as much, they still have support in other ways. We don't have the support here. So even if we're comparing it with other countries where ours may be relatively higher, we don't have the extra supports which they have.
I think you're not correct. Find out from the Tertiary Education Trust Fund, where my former boss, Architect Sunday Chana, holds sway. Find out how much is being allocated to research. It's there.
And it gets down
exactly,
to the right
it gets
person.
down, it does. I was a member of the governing council of the Federal University of Technology for 4 years. I know what was happening. So, research grant, more so, whose responsibility it is to generate funds for research grants. It's not purely the government.
Not at all. It's not even the.
It's largely the university.
Yes.
And universities have autonomy to do that. How much of research grant have they attracted for their professors, for their departments? We need to be realistic. And that is where I say it from the onset that we're not likely going to see the solution anytime soon.
But do they actually have the autonomy? Yes, I agree with you on this point. Because where I disagree, I'll disagree.
Yeah.
But with this, I agree with you. The universities should go the extra mile in attracting this funding in public-private partnerships. We've seen the CBN rebuild some halls. I've seen that in Nasarawa State University. I've seen that in some places where they get other MDAs and the private sector to support. The universities, I agree with you, should try their own ways to attract funding and revenue. However, do they really have the autonomy?
Of course, when we get to that bridge of autonomy, we will cross it and cross it beautifully. But let me say this for the time being. They have the autonomy to attract research grants. They have. I told you I was a member of the governing council of the Federal University of Technology or whatever. Nothing stops any university from going into or making any efforts at attracting research grant. Of course, I must say this, universities do not have the full autonomy. Financial autonomy most especially. This does not contradict the statement I've said. They do not have full autonomy. Full autonomy, financial autonomy especially here, I mean, let them be free to generate and spend their revenue, spend the money they make. I have been an advocate of that. ASSU fought for so many years for autonomy. Go and mention autonomy to any ASSU member now. He will catch cold. And the reason is simple. They realize that autonomy is not likely going, the full autonomy as it were, is not going to accommodate the kind of things they've been agitating for. It will certainly not, because when a university is now generating its own fund and spending, you can't be talking about end academic allowance where literally everybody benefits. You can't be talking about funding certain things. Go to some universities, you find some projects that are really not needed. They are initiated.
Really?
Yes, of course. That's why you have abandoned this in the university system. You have two kinds of or three kinds of projects. Projects funded from budgetary allocations, annual budgetary allocations. Projects funded by TED Fund. Projects funded from donations, grants, and stuff like that. There are some projects that are there that universities do not need them. So if you go into the nitty-gritty of it, you will discover that some of those projects were created not out of necessity. You can't go to a private school and find a structure that is not being put to
So
use.
is this the responsibility of NUC,
The
TED
universities,
Fund,
I won't
or
wait for
the,
it.
or
It is
Ministry
the
of Education?
responsibility of the university to take the project to the letters. When you don't do that, you're creating an impression that that project was a job for the boys. And it hangs.
Understandable. So let's talk about the fact that some people have argued that if university lecturers and universities want enough funding, they must increase the fees for universities. I remember going to school and I went to a state university and the fees were relatively low. It's what I paid for the 4 years would be like a quarter of what a private university would pay. And so it's largely subsidized for us in Nigeria. We can't deny that fact. I remember when Ekiti and I think Ogun State, the state government had tried to increase school fees and there were protests around there. How do we balance this? Because the average Nigerian is saying it's hard enough for us to even get to school. It's hard enough to get into school. It's hard enough to pay the fees which are the current standard. And now people are saying, oh, the universities need to charge higher. And then we had this comparisons that, oh, in XYZ countries like the US spend over 100,000. I don't agree with that comparison, but how do we strike a balance?
Oof, that's question
It's
is
loaded.
central to all of the discourse, and indeed central to the national discourse on tertiary education, in particular university education. Let me summarize it this way, then we can go breaking it down. Universities require financial autonomy, and by financial autonomy I mean they should have the freedom to charge the school fees they want to charge. Tied to that, yes, the immediate question that confronts us, and that is on the lips of everyone, is if you ask universities to charge what they want, there are ABCD questions to answer. One, can the students afford it, like you rightly said? My answer is yes. But autonomy should not be in isolation. Autonomy must be tied to the current loan scheme. So that those who do not have the student loan scheme, so that those who do not have the wherewithal can borrow from the student loan scheme and finance their education for whatever cost. And I am also of the opinion that this shouldn't be restricted to public universities. If you are giving loans to students to finance their education, let them pick up their loan and go to whatever institution, whatever university they want to go to study. It shouldn't be, federal. I don't think the primary aim of government is to promote public education or public university system. No. The primary aim of government is to ensure that more and more Nigerians have access to quality tertiary education.
It's tied to money.
So it's tied to money. And that money can easily come. And let me break it down. If you float the desired student loans scheme. One, it must have credible sources of funding. Two, we must use the BVN of parents, of sponsors, to be able to arrive at who is qualified to benefit from this loan. It is scientific. You run it on your system and it will tell you who is qualified. It will not be about who can lobby or who is privileged in XYZ manner to access this loan. So, strengthen the student loans scheme. You have trillions of naira there. Believe you me, the country will be looking for students to give loans to study.
So in Nigeria, we have a situation where everything is okay on paper.
Yeah.
The implementation becomes a problem. I remember in the last administration, they had some agri-based loans which they were meant to give the members of the public. People were told, you've been awarded this loan, you should have access to it, but never got the loan. What now happens, allegedly, is you'll find out that they will send some communication to the National Assembly and say, all of you send a list of your constituents and we'll give it to them. And so these things are still being used to settle people. Now, I will commend this government for starting a student loan fund, but what's the guarantee that we don't get back to a point where it now becomes, oh, you bring a list of your constituents and the process now becomes tainted? However, I'm not saying that's happening now.
Yeah.
But it's only a matter of time, and leadership matters. There's the human factor which now affects this, where regardless of checking the BVN, someone just says, you know what, this state send 500 names, you do this. And we are back to the same cycle.
I agree with you, but in this case, and by my count,
Yes.
we're not likely going to face challenges. Take, for instance, as a director in the federal service, as I was then, if I apply, if my child applies for a student loan, it is imputed in the system.
Okay.
The system brings out my BVN. This is where the student loans body is getting it wrong. They ask for the BVN of students. For what? The original conception of the student loan scheme said the BVN of the parent, the BVN of the sponsor. You know, BVN tells you a story more than your salary.
Yes.
BVN has everything about what is running through that account. So, by the time you run the BVN, you say, oh, this account has 20 million and above per annum running through. So, this student can afford to pay. And then you also look at the aggregate income of the loans board. If we have 2 trillion, how many students can we sponsor? In how many courses can we sponsor with 2 trillion? So you run your BVN on all that have been enlisted and then draw the line. The people at the lower this thing automatically will qualify. So it's going to be pretty difficult. And let me also say this. I am not saying this is not going to happen, but it's unlikely. I don't see a minister going to lobby to get a loan that is meant for poor students. I don't see a senator. I don't see a highly placed government official. I don't see a big-time businessman going to lobby to get Chinkere loan for his child to study. I don't think so. So it's not likely going to happen. We will have. Let's take the skepticism away. It is a very plain field where we will operate smoothly and have the desired result, have positive, good result.
You say let's take the skepticism away, but even when this fund started, the person in charge of the fund, I forgot his name. He had to come on TV
Yeah.
to defend the fund because there were already allegations of money not being given to the right people not being able to access money in billions, which was already appropriated. Yes, he was able to defend this and plead his own case, which the general public needed. And so, if at the beginning of the process people had already started raising concern,
Yeah.
how can Nigerians be skeptical? We've seen this happen in humanitarian ministry. We've
Very
seen this
well.
happen in different spaces.
Well, the student loans scheme is slightly different from some of these palliative schemes. It's not a palliative scheme. It's money you are borrowing and you're coming back to pay. It's not a palliative. Let's get that clear. Yes, I agree with you that the scheme itself started on a faulty note. But when the first time it started, it was to be operated in the office of the chief of staff. And I raised questions. I called a member of the House of Representatives from my constituency. And I said, sir, this is not right. A student loans board ought to be an office with a complete apparatus to function. It ought to be an office where students will be running in and out to sort out their loan challenges. Running it in the office of the chief of staff does not have those apparatus. The staff
To make it sustainable.
will not. In fact, by the time let me come. By the time they even started, this thing took off. The allocation, 5 billion naira, to me, sounded like a palliative. I said, no, that is not the way to go. We must have a complete body. I was one of the proponents of the student loans scheme, and I fought vehemently. Why did I do that? Because tied to university autonomy and ASSU strike, if the student loan scheme operates maximally, operates at optimum, then the question of ASSU will disappear without slapping anybody.
Because the schools now have funding to be able to pay their staff
self-funding,
with their
they will
autonomy.
draw much of their revenue from the students' school fees. Now, let me tell you, it might be the same money going to the university, but the name you give to the money you spend determines the result you get. If you take 100 million and pay for your wife's bride price, who is likely going to smile to the bank? Your in-laws.
Yes.
If they carry you, bandits, so to speak, carry you, and you pay them
As a
100
Nigerian,
million,
I'm forced to say God forbid, but please go on.
who is going to smile to the bank? It is the
The
bandits.
bandits.
If you go to your church and pay 1/10 or tithe, who is going to smile to the bank? The pastor. So yes, the money will be coming from government, but once it is a loan, it is likely to give us a different result.
The good part about this conversation is that you've spoken about the infrastructure which we have, you've spoken about what's being done and the possible solutions which we would have if everything is done in the right place. Because of time, we'll have to end now, but this will be a two-part series because we need to bring you back to talk about even when they're finished with these loans, the students, what about employment? How do you recover the loan? So this is going to be a two-part series where we'll have to bring you back to continue this conversation. But because of time, we'll have to end it here. I'll let you have your final word in 1 minute.
I think President Bola Ahmed Tinubu came in with the best of intentions. The student loans scheme was the first bill he signed into law. He had the best of intentions, but he has not been fully advised on how it should run. So I will advise Nigerians, those who have the privilege of advising the minister, particularly the Minister of Education, of advising the president, to come up with a comprehensive Student Loans Act that will clearly state the funding options,
Yeah.
the operations, how students are going to benefit, how repayment is going to be made. And by the time we have that comprehensive Student Loans Act, believe you me, and if it is on the table of President Tinubu today, I can guarantee you that he will sign.
I think that's a good place to leave it. Mr. Benjamin Bemgong will be brought back to the studio to continue this conversation. He is a public affairs analyst and retired director of information and public relations at the Federal